We are back from summer and back into the fall work. All of us, I think, are up to our ears and plenty of things to do. And we do have an ambitious fall that we're working on to try to move the housing counseling agenda forward. We're going to talk about some of that today on today's call, and we have some guests. So let's just dive right in. Because of people's schedules, we're going to start right away with our guests, and the agenda really quickly is, as you know, the HUD Task Force has been doing a lot of work. Over 30 people have been part of this task force, representing large organizations, small organizations, intermediaries, networks, and local groups. Afreen has reported on it in past calls. We've got a very kind of much more detailed set of proposals that we circulated this week, and it's sitting in your inbox if you didn't get it yesterday. So we'll walk through that some, and then we're going to have a number of meetings in D.C. coming up. We'll talk about it some length. One of them is going to be with the new HUD Secretary, Julian Castro, and he's a pretty exciting person. I think this could show add some new energy with HUD, and we have some pretty specific goals we'd like to talk to him about what we can do. We'll go into those in some detail. There's an interesting opportunity at the SEC about how to integrate housing counseling into our work. We'll talk about and some other issues we'll work on. And we're going to announce the third annual Leaders in Housing Counseling meeting, which will be coming up shortly. So stay tuned to the end of the call because we're going to give you time, dates, and locations. So with that note, let's dive in. So we have Ellie Pepper from Empire Justice, frequently involved in many of our programs, and I think we have Stephanie Galvin-Riley. Stephanie, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Oh, good. Okay, so we have both the teams. So Afreen wasn't able to be on this call, but we have two of the major contributors to the HUD Task Force work, and I think everybody should have a copy of the task force proposals, so that I think the idea here is that we'd like to get a real sense of what, and make sure that we've hit the nail on the head, and if people have some ideas or suggestions, we're interested in taking them. We're going to be meeting with Sarah Jarik and for an hour with Carol Galante next week around these, and their staff. It's going to be a 5-hour major meeting. It's a major commitment on their part. They have seen the broad outline, though not all the specifics that we've proposed. And so this is a real opportunity to try to fix some of the many problems that you all have brought up in the past, and through the task force and through the listserv and through conversations. So, you know, this is one more opportunity to make sure we got the list right, and if you've got some creative solutions, we're interested in them. So, Ellie, Stephanie, do you have any opening remarks, or should we just dive into the list? Well, I say let's dive into the list then. So, one of the areas that we're going to kind of work from our way down. So one of the areas that's been a major concern has been around the contract extension and the time periods and how you handle reporting. Do you want to just kind of lay out the issue there, Ellie or Stephanie?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Oh, great, because I was trying to speak earlier and you weren't hearing me. This is Ellie.
Okay.
And I want one opening remark I want to say is kudos to you, Bruce, and Matthew for getting these meetings set up. I do know that it's a lot of work to make that happen, and also that this is one of the first meetings, I think, if I'm not wrong, that Julian Castro is allowing and has set up. So kudos. And I'm so excited about it. Very excited.
Oh, good. Cool.
So I'll talk a little bit about one of the areas that I'm going to be speaking about, and that's the biennial performance reviews. So we're just going to kind of try to find out from them some ways that maybe things can be a little bit more cohesive and the same across the board, no matter who your point of contact is regarding those biennial performance reviews. And I'll let Stephanie talk about the areas that she's going to be focusing on.
Okay, thanks, Ellie. This is Stephanie, and just as a little background, this is definitely a culmination of work that's been going on since the end of last year. We had our first HUD task force meetings at the end of 2013, so we've been working on it for quite a while. So on the agenda for items to speak on, in addition to some other things, there are several people attending the meetings, and each portion of the agenda is assigned to someone different that has kind of a relationship to the topic that's being covered. So some of the things that we're going to talk about, and the agenda, I believe, was attached to a Freens email that was sent to everyone, was, as Bruce had said, the implication for the extension of the contract period. And since the fiscal year 15 contract period might be extended as a result of the year 14 contract extension, what is the future plan for HUD contract periods? We need to kind of know that in order to plan our budgets. As we all know, that's pretty difficult to do. And we also have a request that HUD conducts a webinar on the implications of these contract extensions and how it should be tracked. Something that I'm going to be helping discuss is the point of contact, the POCs as we call them, and we're hoping to get more uniform, accessible point of contact, someone that's going to be available, provide us with the proper information when we ask for it, and notify us when the point of contact is going to be away, and have some sort of backup, among other things, on the agenda items. And Bruce, stop me if I'm going into too much detail.
I think
again,
the detail's good. I think we want to hear from people if they've got some concerns, and if we got these right or not. They do have the document hopefully in front of them.
Right, absolutely.
So I think detail is helpful here.
Because we are there representing all of you, and we can't speak on your behalf and get it right if you think we don't have it right unless you let us know. So please definitely add into the conversation.
And I would add on the contract issues, the question about how to report the 9902, what contract, if you have an extension that takes you past the traditional contract year, how do you handle the reporting of the 9902? Which contract does it get applied to? That's a question I think people have asked.
Yes. Let's see, I'm just looking over the agenda myself, and the next item would be under the topic of cost of service assessment. And basically, we want HUD to provide guidance and perhaps a best practice model on how agencies are to come up with the cost for providing housing services. Some agencies have told me that they use a NeighborWorks calculation or a formula that's given by NeighborWorks, and it's a pretty complicated formula. But we're looking for HUD to provide us with guidance on that.
And this is an important issue because it's when you're getting an audit from HUD or a review from HUD, this is one of the things organizations get evaluated on, and there's been not a lot of direction on specifically how to do this. It's a very complicated accounting thing, and we're hearing from some groups that they haven't done it yet, and they need to, and we've heard from groups that they've done it, and they don't have confidence in that what they've done represents what HUD needs. And the big issue is there are these OMB circulars that are notorious because they're very difficult to understand, and it's not enough for a HUD representative to say, oh, go read the OMB, it's all in there, because the OMB circulars are very difficult to interpret. And so it's an area that we need much stronger guidance from HUD and more assistance?
The topic that I personally will be assisting with is as far as reporting, HUD reporting, both billing and the management of the reports. So what we want to cover is we want HUD to provide an explanation of how time can and cannot be billed, and I'm specifically relating to the personal activity report or the PAR, how time can and cannot be billed. There's a lot of confusion on this issue, and we're asking HUD to also offer trainings. I know that they have a technical guide that we can access that explains it, but basically we still need further clarification. Additionally, the HUD points of contact and the reviewers that do our biannual reports, or biannual reviews, I should say, give different agencies different information of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable as far as billing goes. We're hoping that HUD will work closer with the CMSs to incorporate billing features into the software, that we're asking that financial draws be separated from the reporting process, and that HUD allows the draws to be submitted more often than quarterly, and how all this will impact the program, particularly the PAR, or the Personal Activity Report, and what are their plans for training us. You know, basically, there's a lot of different ideas of what is acceptable and what isn't, and the different points of contact are saying different things. My other personal issue with it is we're a very small agency in upstate New York. The amount of work that I'm required to do to keep up with the billing and reporting is not commensurate with the amount of money we receive from HUD. The amount of basically widget counting and detail-oriented work that I'm required to do really is not beneficial or cost-effective in relation to the small amount of money that we get. So we're going to, and there's no way we can do away with this type of billing because HUD is required to gather this information. So we understand that, and we're not asking them to completely do away with the reporting, but we're going to try to hopefully come up with a way that's beneficial for both sides. HUD gets the information they need without making it onerous for the agencies. As far as reporting management goes, we've talked about NFMC, the National Foreclosure Mitigation Counseling Reporting System, as a model, and we don't necessarily advocate HUD adopting that, but we'd like to explore if there are lessons learned about simplifying the reporting. And then we're asking for more time for intermediaries to submit their quarterly reports because the timing is just not working. And let's see. Ellie, anytime you want to jump in, please feel free.
Okay.
Housing Counseling System, HCS, where we input our information. We're asking for clarity on who is supposed to submit the 9902 when agencies are part of an intermediary. And some of this information, I believe we did just have a training, or HUD just gave a training on the new 9902 that's coming out in October. And some of this I do believe was clarified that we still have on the agenda. And then we're asking HUD to work with the CMS providers to ensure that it connects with HCS effectively. And then have a live customer service phone line for technical assistance on HCS because it's very difficult to get help and it's not user-friendly when it's not working properly. We want HUD to provide clarity on the requirements for MOUs with lenders.
Just as a background on that particular one, so there was one point of contact from HUD who was saying that local agencies couldn't sign agreements with lenders that involved funding, and even though HUD had model agreements for how to do this on their website, and so part of it is making sure that those kind of problems don't occur. And then part of it is also having a system in place where people know where to go if they're having problems with their point of contact, which occurs. We hear about this fairly often. So just trying to figure out how to make it work more smoothly.
And just listening to Bruce too, and in me verbalizing this agenda, it seems like it's a lot of the reoccurring theme is basically a lot of it is communication between what the points of contact or the HUD representatives are knowledgeable on and trained on, and versus what they're telling us. We're kind of getting different information from different agencies, get different information. And I think that it's great that HUD wants us to work with them. I mean, we're all working for ultimately the clients that we service and ultimately the same goal. So they're very open to hearing our side of the story and trying to work with us. So it's not really an adversarial relationship. It's kind of a learning relationship that we can work together on.
So I just want to make one comment about the points of contact also. I listened to a webinar that HUD recently did on the new 9910, which is part of the biennial performance review. And within that, they stated that there is actually a standard operating procedure manual for the points of contact to use in order to ensure that they are all doing the same thing and in the same way. So we're going to see if we can get a copy of that so that we have an idea and we can, discuss with everybody what those standard operating procedures are, and so then everybody has a better idea of what to expect.
Right, and that's the manual on how to do the performance review. So the manual that the HUD person works from, so that you have. And we had Sarah DeRiek on the call a couple months ago, and looks like they were doing some good things. So it's not an automatic 2 years. Somebody comes to your door. It could be that it might be a desk review for some agencies. If an agency is really having trouble, then it may be more frequent, but less frequent for agencies that have really established themselves. Not having to repeatedly submit every year your incorporation documents and your 501c3 letter, things that take up time and don't add to the value, because if they've got it on file, they've got it on file.
Yeah, and it's nice that they've developed the 9910 so that you only have to fill it out once, and then you just continuously update it so that at your biennial review you don't submit a new one. You just make sure that everything's up to date. So there's some good things happening.
And
just to jump in, we've had a few comments. One on this particular matter is from Jason Thomas, who said that he'd be interested in what some of the specific factors are that play into the decision to review different organizations over different intervals, some every 2 years, some every 3 years.
Good.
Yeah, we are actually going to be asking for that, for the risk assessment model. So that's a great point.
Okay, so should I continue with the agenda item?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay, all right. So on the financial audit requirements, there was some question as to when an independent audit versus financial statements for agencies that receive less than $500,000 in federal grant funds is acceptable. So we're going to ask HUD to provide clarity on that. A couple of groups on our task force were given conflicting information. So we're going to ask for that. As far as training webinars go, I do want to say they have come out with, like Ellie said, a training on the 9910, which is the biannual performance review form. It's, I don't know how many pages, but it's their revised form, as well as the new 9902s. Those should all be archived on the HUD website. So if you did not get a chance to see those, you can log on to the HUD website and look at the archives. But as far as training webinars go, we're asking them to host webinars that just go beyond presenters reading verbatim from the PowerPoint and actually include interpretations of rules and requirements, examples of best practices perhaps, and other more substantive information. And also allowing live question and answer sessions where all the questions are addressed and not just the frequently asked questions. So at this point, I'm going to hand over the last part of the agenda to Ellie, because I'm afraid I might have to drop off. I have another meeting I have to go to that I could not change. So again, I believe Bruce and Matthew did say either by responding in the chat box here, or you can email them later on. Please let us know your feedback. So Ellie,
Great.
if you want to just continue on.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Great. So the next topic that we're going to be talking about is scoring, and asking HUD to give some clarity on the internal scores that they use to assess. For example, the budget, services and modes, networks, and other HUD programs. To ask them for clarity on what is the general acceptable norm for administrative charges, to add a category within that for oversight and monitoring, because it's such a big expense and responsibility for the intermediaries especially, and it could be a way to discuss some best practices and discourage cutting corners.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that, and just to clarify that, here's the tension, is HUD seems to value that administrative costs are low, but it's actually expensive to be doing lots of support activities and monitoring. And so that's the tension in there, and groups that are providing higher levels of service in their intermediary contracts are maybe penalized because they're doing more of what HUD expects them to do, and that's the sort of the tension that groups feel.
So also asking them if within the scoring they would exclude a question about whether or not an organization is participating in other HUD programs, because it doesn't seem like that should really be a reason to score somebody one way or another as to whether or not they're involved in other HUD programs. But at the same time, to allow bonus points when an organization is involved in a program that pertains to the housing counseling program. And the example that we're using here is like sustainable communities. We're asking for some clarification on the cost per client calculation and doing it maybe a little bit differently than the way that they are doing it, to allow for some maybe out-of-the-box thinking on that. Around timeline, to allow, again, we mentioned earlier in the agenda, allow intermediaries additional time for their application submission. So just as them needing more time to submit reports, they have to gather from several organizations before they can submit. So they need more time. And this has been a repeated issue for the intermediaries. And to conduct some webinars and put out some frequently asked questions instead of delaying by 2 weeks. Train the points of contact to provide assistance during the NOFA process, and require that the points of contact be available during the NOFA process to provide assistance. So that's it in a nutshell.
We do have one mostly comment, kind of a question that I'll just get out there now. It's from Bernell Greer, who says, I think it is important to discuss the extended, this is going back to the extended contract period. She thinks it's important to discuss and ask for guidance on. She said, what also happens if there is a change in intermediary and or new applications, and then says the webinar that we're asking for could include if there is an interim NOFA. Not positive with that. I might be missing something at the end there, but
actually, these are great issues, and Bernell will be with us, so that will be important to bring up. And I think an area where we had asked HUD about this a few months ago, and they were trying to figure this out. But so we have the current contract year, and the NOFA was for 2 contract years. And in the second contract year, what happens if an agency changes changes their intermediary, or if an intermediary takes in new agencies, where do they go? Does that mean then that the scoring stays the same, and the dollar amount that intermediary has will stay the same, and just divide it up among more parties, which creates a real disincentive to do this? Or is there a way to try to rationalize that? What happens? There is an interest in a couple groups becoming intermediaries between now and then. You know, how do they get factored in? So those are things that would be helpful to know now before the NOFA comes in, because for many intermediaries, actually, it takes a while to become a member, and there's a process, and very few of them are some of them are able to take in new applicants, but it's quickly, but some of them have an extended process. So trying to get some clarity on that now before the NOFA process starts.
And just one other comment that just came in from Daniel Galindo, who said it's his understanding HUD moved away from BPR to simple PR, and a number of factors would be taken into consideration to decide if the agency would be reviewed, such as client complaints and so forth.
Absolutely right. We have to call them PRs now. Good. Well, so feel free to think about this and shoot emails if you've got some more thoughts on this to me, to Afreen, to Ellie and Stephanie. We'll all be part of the conversation. We are trying to figure out how to make this all work. And I think part of this, I think, as Stephanie mentioned, is to improve the communications with HUD and the more consistent results that we get from HUD, from our points of contact particularly, and ways to solve those problems. But some of it is also to try to think about mechanical solutions that will reduce the reporting and work burden for the agencies, but still meet OMB guidelines. So we expect to kind of get deep into the details on this, and it's try to address the issues, but also work within the constraints that HUD has. So it should be very helpful. Ellie, do you have any closing thoughts here?
I don't. Just again, thank you to both of you for setting that up. And Afreen is not on, but she did a lot of work to put this agenda together and put all of our thoughts and ideas into a coherent schedule.
Good. Well, we'll next call we'll be reporting back on how this all went, and we really appreciate everybody's contributions here. So let's move on to what we've got coming up. So we'll be in D.C. next week for a round of meetings. We'll be meeting with Seth Wheeler, who's in the White House. He's with the National Economic Council, and his portfolio is housing. And Karen Chang, who is also in the NEC. So we'll have a meeting with them. We'll meet with FHFA. We'll meet with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. We will meet with Senate, with a number of people in the Senate, staffers, including Megan McCarthy, who is the person who does housing on APROPS. She's been around for a long time, very knowledgeable, and is a key player in all this, and one that we want to keep dialoguing with. So, but the high point, one of the high points for us will be this meeting we're going to have with HUD, and we'll have an hour-long meeting with the new Secretary of HUD, Julian Castro. He's the ex-mayor from San Antonio, and you may all remember that Henry Cisneros was an ex-mayor of San Antonio as well, and is now and then went to HUD and really helps elevate housing counseling, and worked very closely with us to create things like the intermediaries program and much higher level activities. So there's a proud tradition there. And I think what we're trying to think of the meeting with Julian Castro around several things. So one is we don't know that he's had that much contact with the housing counseling world, so we want to do a very kind of baseline intro about the impact and effectiveness of counseling, the fact that we're a very low-cost program relative to others, but see 1.5 million plus people every year under the HUD umbrella, and we are a valuable force out there, and we want to think about that. But a second thing is that we have that the role of the secretary could be to really increase the visibility and reputation of housing counseling by when he travels to make a point of stopping by housing counseling programs, in speeches incorporating that housing counseling is available for people when they're buying a house or when they're in trouble on their mortgage, when they need a reverse mortgage, all kinds of things like that. But that part of this, we're hoping part of the strategy that HUD will have will be to really create a deeper sense of that people should go to a counselor before they make major financial housing decisions, and that the secretary could play a big role in that. We want to give them compliments and kudos for the innovation that's been happening in the Office of Housing Counseling, and certainly Sarah Jarik's work and Carol Galante. We want to really just give a shout out here because they are doing cutting-edge, exciting work in a field that hasn't seen much of that from government agencies. So we're very pleased with what they're doing. We want to make sure that they get recognition from the secretary level. Secretary Donovan had a hand in the settlements that were negotiated. The team that is working on the settlements with the Department of Justice, the team at HUD has changed a lot, and so a lot of the the experienced people that had been doing it are no longer there. So we think that there's still going to be more settlements in the pipeline, and we've seen some real improvements in the last round in the Bank of America and the Citi one particularly, that the resources are more targeted, it's more specific around housing counseling. So wanting to make sure that continues and that we can get access, and maybe they can help us get access to the Department of Justice. And then finally, this whole issue for us about HUD housing counseling funding and NFMC funding. And as we all know, we slogged through a year of trying to get realizing the NFMC funding is going to be cut, having as much of that money migrate to HUD housing counseling as possible, and being pretty specific that not everybody thinks that on the Hill, though we have a tremendous amount of support. We have bipartisan support. We actually had Republicans go to the mat for us to increase the HUD housing counseling funding on the House side. So it's not a partisan issue, but there's a feeling that the NFMC was temporary funding and that any money that's there should just be played out rather than some of it being transferred to increase the HUD housing counseling money. That's an unfortunate viewpoint, given that we used to be at $87.5 million and we're now at $45 million. So trying to get some of that money restored with NFMC funding as a shift, that would be really, that's kind of our goal, and we hope that certainly HUD will be involved in drafting the President's budget, so we need it to show up there in that form, and we're hoping to get that seed planted early. So we're looking forward to the meeting with him. We'll see what happens. We'll certainly report back on that. But that's our that's our assessment at the moment on what we're going to try to accomplish. We also have a new issue that's come to light, which is with the Securities and Exchange Commission. And it's an area we have done no work in. I've done no work in, but we're beginning to learn on it. And our soon-to-be resident expert is Matthew Gaudreau, who's been diving deep into the, how many pages, 600 pages of rulemaking with SEC. So why don't you explain what we got and what the opportunity is?
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. So the SEC, as Bruce mentioned, just last week, I guess it was, released a rulemaking. It's about disclosures that issuers of asset-backed securities will need to make. I'm not going to get too deep into the background of what we're talking about. I think this chart up here is actually pretty helpful in understanding for folks that aren't familiar with asset-backed securities, and in particular, we're concerned about residential mortgage-backed securities. It's basically just the idea that what happens, lenders make a whole bunch of mortgages. They put those all together into a pool, and then they basically just slice them up into different securities. As this shows, some are riskier and have a lower return. Some are riskier and have a higher return. Some are supposed to be really safe and have a lower return. The problem that the SEC saw or sees, and the reason that they're doing this rulemaking requiring additional disclosures, is that they felt like there wasn't enough information, that potential investors didn't have enough information on in this case, the mortgages that were underlying these securities that they were buying, and so that folks were just relying too heavily on the ratings from the ratings agencies, which turned out to be really deeply flawed. So they're trying to encourage, they're trying to give investors access to more information about the assets that are underlying the securities they're buying. So that's what they're trying to address, and so they're requiring issuers of the securities to provide disclosures on the loans underlying, the mortgages underlying the asset-backed securities. So the information that they're requiring are things like the borrower's credit score, the DTI, the original loan amount, the original LTV, all kinds of information that they think will give investors a better idea of what's happening with the securities that they're buying. So what we would like to see is for the SEC to add to that the required disclosures whether a borrower received housing counseling. And there's a few good reasons for this. First, we think that investors should have the information because the evidence shows, as we all know, that loans that have been counseled tend to perform better, so that should be relevant information to investors. But we also just think it's important for this information to be out there because there's some concern that if you're requiring disclosure of information like credit score and DTI, but you're not including the information about whether a loan's been counseled, it could kind of scare off investors of mortgages that are being sold to lower income people or people that may be perceived as more of a credit risk, and it could also end up affecting the lending that's actually happening. If it drives up the cost of those securities, or if people are buying those securities because they get scared off, then that obviously affects the lending that's happening, because almost all mortgages that are made now are made with the view of selling them off, not holding them in portfolio like what used to be the case. So this is not something that they just made this rulemaking, so it's not likely that this is going to be an overnight change, that we're going to get this to happen. But it's something that as Bruce said, we're just starting to learn about. We're getting some contacts with the SEC. We're going to start having the conversation with them, start talking to investors. But it is something that it's an important thing that we'll be working on in the kind of short to medium term. And yeah. Bruce, do you have any questions, or do you want to add anything? And I think there are some comments here that I'll just take a second to look at.
Yeah. So the value here would be that if an investor's looking at a pool of mortgages, that they would not only see what credit scores were, but also whether the household got counseling. And the reporting mechanism that we can use is what we've now established with the National Mortgage Database Program, and the entry of the information through the mortgage application. So the idea would be that there would be all the people handling the mortgage would know which agencies have been, which people have been counseled, and actually would know which agency. But so that kind of gives an assistance to or community reinvestment kind of loans that have had counseling on them. And hopefully that will strengthen our hand. We're in a long-term situation here. They just did the rule, so they'd have to make an amendment to the rule. That stuff takes time. And one of the things we'll do in D.C. is to try to recruit allies on the Hill and in some of the agencies in the White House for supporting something like this.
And so I'll just follow up with there's a comment from Linda Gerkensmeyer who suggests also trying to get SEC to include the loan originator in these disclosures. She says there's definite patterns about the quality of underwriting that would become apparent. So that's an interesting idea that we'll take into consideration.
Cool. Great. Okay, so one more issue on the list, but a valuable one. So we'll also be talking about language access, and it looks like we are finally getting some kind of higher level attention at CFPB on this issue. As you know, we had really tried to get this into the servicing standards. They said they wanted to study it more. We met with them last spring, and it was pretty clear that no progress had been made at all on this, much to our frustration. We brought this up in a meeting with Director Cordray, and looks like now that there's more wheels turning. So we want to. So it's actually very helpful right now if you've got some experience with people having language access problems in servicing or in originating. Please shoot them our way, because we all this stuff becomes fodder for examples and helps develop the policy. We're also going to bring up the credit report pricing challenge that soft pulls by Equifax are priced much more aggressively, much more expensive than hard pulls, and the other agencies, other bureaus do not charge differently for that. It's really the same report. It's only how it's scored in the model, and so the idea that there'd be a higher pricing would be just seems unfair and discriminates against our the work that we do and our clients. So we're very interested in trying to see if that can get fixed. CFPB does not regulate pricing, but can look into discriminatory issues. So we'll see where we land with that. Let's see. We'll also continue the conversation about outreach and seeing if Treasury can. We won't be meeting with Treasury, but we will be talking with the White House about this, about trying to get a real outreach program to help drive people who are in foreclosure, who have either not come or could become eligible or have rate resets, to get them into counseling. And then finally, we will, as always, be talking about integrating housing counseling into mortgage origination and actually also into servicing. I guess I left that part off, but both areas, so that it's more automatic that people go to counseling, and there's more automatic ways that counseling agencies get paid. We're encouraging FHFA to look at this seriously, and there seems to be some interest there. Other groups are working on this as well through the Coalition of Intermediaries. So there's real opportunity here. We think we will bring this up with the White House as well, and try to make sure that this stuff gets more traction and attention as we go along. So what we've so I think the next step here is we'll have our meeting. We'll have our meeting. So we're going to have our meeting with our national meeting is going to be Thursday, December 11th. So you have plenty of time to plan your schedule here. It'll be in Washington, D.C. It'll be in the same complex of groups of locations where the NeighborWorks training is. NeighborWorks has been generous enough to sponsor a room for us. And we are, it's going to be the day before the NeighborWorks NFMC grantee meeting. So our meeting will be on Thursday 11th, and the NeighborWorks meeting will be on Friday, December 12th for NFMC grantees. So a number of you will be coming in anyways, but as in past, we also have plenty of people come in just for these meetings. We will invite in key people that affect our work but we also will have a chance for people to talk among themselves as well and to try to shape more of our direction and make plans for the future. So please mark your calendars on this. We will, after we get these meetings in DC done, we'll start laying the groundwork for these meetings, and we'll have a registration process and all that sort of thing. But wanted to get that on your calendars early because this is usually, we typically have 90 or 100 leaders in that from the housing counseling world in the room, as well as guests, and we really want you to be there as well. So we're looking forward to being able to have another exciting and useful meeting on that part. So I would like just to say a big thanks, because we've had a flurry of new members join NHRC in August, and we'll post the names of the new groups. But there's been a surge in membership. We really appreciate that a lot. It makes a big difference for us, and it's also encouraging. We will continue to offer the credit report discount, and we will this fall we will roll out some new resources as membership benefits. We're just trying to get it all to work right on the website before we make them available, but they will be resources that you can use to help get resources for helping people buy houses and some funding streams and things like that. We think will be useful to agencies. We're also in the process of working on a series of member webinars. So we will have webinars. We'll have a regular series of webinars for everybody, but we're going to do some more directed webinars that are around compliance issues, reporting, and documentation issues, things that people have asked for. We'll do a survey in the next few weeks to ask which ones you'd be most interested in getting. We'll do the survey for the members, and so we'll be offering some more tools for people as a result. So we hope you'll take advantage of that. And so please, if you haven't joined yet, please join. And we really also appreciate that now that we're in our third year, that we have a very high ratio of groups that are renewing their memberships. In fact, very few haven't, so that's really great. And it is what keeps us going, and we appreciate that a lot. That's enough said in that department. So we're back onto our regular schedule for the meetings. We'll be doing the first and third Thursday of every month, and we'll be in communication on that. Let me just check with Matthew and see, are there any other comments or questions people had that we have in the queue? No? Good. Well, it's a nice, efficient call, and we've done a little bit early, so thanks for all your good work. Please feel free to communicate with us if you've got some more ideas on the HUD task force or other things we're working on. Talk to you all later. Talk to you in 2 weeks. Great. Bye.